Hi everyone, welcome back to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith. Luke and I are going to be facing off in a match of Ashes, Rise of the Phoenix Born that I hope you'll join us for, but I wanted to create this video to help prepare things. I wanted to give you a chance to see the decks that we had chosen and actually go through the different cards that you'll find in each and explain them. In this way, not only will you get quite an introduction to some of the different effects and abilities that you'll come across in the Ashes game, but also when we're doing our gameplay, you'll already understand the different cards and I won't have to stop and explain as much as we're playing. And if you have any questions about anything you see here, if you're not quite sure about how an effect works, you can ask in the comments of this video and I'll answer them. So everyone's on the same page and we can all just jump right into the gameplay. Now we are using two of the basic decks that the game suggests for your first couple of games. Of course, you can deck build and create all kinds of different combinations, but we thought we'd start where most people who play this game will probably start as well. So let's go to the table and we'll take a look first at Luke's deck. Luke has chosen Aerodel Summer Guard for his Phoenix Born. She has a life total of 16. That's how much damage I'll be trying to do to win. And she can field up to 8 different units. Those are Conjurations and Allies. Now, Aerodel, as you'll see, doesn't actually have allies in her deck. Her forces will all come from Conjurations. And in her spell board, she can have up to 4 different ready spells. Her special ability, Water Blast, costs a side action and can then deal 2 damage to a target unit. Remember, units are only allies and conjurations, not Phoenixborn. So he won't be able to target me directly with this, but it's a strong effect for a low cost. Thankfully, it exhausts when he uses it, so we can only do it once per round. Luke will have 5 natural magic die in his pool, and as a side action, he can spend one showing the power side in order to deal 1 damage to a target unit. Luke will also have 5 illusion magic dice, and as a side action, if he spends a power side of one of those, he can then move 1 die from an opponent's active die pool to that opponent's exhausted die pool. This is most effective when you know your opponent needs a particular die in order to trigger an effect they want to resolve next, and you can then just remove it from play. Moving on to Luke's main deck, he's going to have 3 copies of Mist Typhoon, and this will allow him to deal 1 damage to all of an opponent's units, and he then gets to draw a card. He'll have 3 copies of Out of the Mist. This is an action spell, and deals an amount of damage equal to the number of units that he has on the field to a target unit. Oh, and then he gets to draw a card as well. Remember, Luke can have up to 8 units in his battlefield, so this can potentially do devastating damage to a unit. Luke's not only going to be doing damage though, he has 3 copies of Steady Gaze. This action spell allows him to place 2 exhaustion tokens on a target unit. So this could shut something down for a couple of rounds potentially. You may have noticed that all of the cards I've shown so far from the main deck have 3 copies. That's going to be true throughout this entire video, so I won't keep mentioning it. You can just keep that in mind. Reflections in the Water is an alteration spell. That means you attach it to a unit. And when this is attached to a unit, that unit loses all of its abilities except inexhaustible ones. As you'll see, most of the effects on my units are inexhaustible, so this one will be less useful for Luke, but it's one he can consider discarding when he wants to take a meditate action and he knows he won't be losing something too valuable. Root Armor is an alteration spell that when attached to a unit will give it 2 additional life, making it harder for me to kill it. And it also has a respark value, so did the previous card. And that simply means that when this card would be going to the discard pile, Luke can spend this value to instead put it back into his hand. Luke has a final alteration spell called Massive Growth, and that's a good title for it because it gives the unit +4 attack and +4 life. That's huge. It also has some limitations. It says this spell can only be played on a unit that has an attack strength of 2 or less. Well, all of Luke's conjurations have an attack strength of 2 or less, so this is well suited for the deck. It also has Spell Guard, and that means that this spell cannot be affected by an opponent's spell. I couldn't play something to cancel it or remove it. Luke can cast this unchallenged. However, it is fleeing, and that means that at the end of the round, this alteration is automatically discarded. So it's great for going in there and getting that 1 big hit you need. This is Shifting Mist, the first of Luke's ready spells. These go into your spell board, where then you can use their effects round after round. As a side action, this one lets Luke change 2 of the dice in his active pool to the sides of his choosing. The game already has ways to mitigate the luck of the dice, by using a meditate action where you throw cards out. Well, this is going to provide Luke another way of getting the dice he needs when he needs it without having to risk losing good cards. This ready spell lets Luke summon a Blue Jaguar Conjuration. This has 2 attack, 2 life, 0 recovery, and an effect that Luke loves to use. Gaze 1 says that after a unit comes into play on an opponent's side of the battlefield, Luke can spend 1 basic die to place 1 exhaustion token on that unit. So when I'm bringing out that conjuration I want to attack with or use a special ability, Luke can just shut it right down as soon as it hits the battlefield. Now, keep in mind, this only works when that unit is first being played. If it's already on the battlefield, Gaze 1 cannot be used to target it. Still, it can really slow down one's plans. Luke also has a ready spell to summon a Butterfly Monk. This has an attack of 1, a life of X, which we'll explain in a moment, and a recovery of 1. It also has some abilities. Unit Guard means that this can step in and defend another unit that's being attacked, where normally only your Phoenixborn can do that. This also has 2 inexhaustible effects. The first one's called Last Blessing 1, and this says that when this unit is destroyed, you can remove 1 wound from a target unit or Phoenixborn. The last effects here is that X. So the X for its life is equal to the number of Summon Butterfly Monk ready spells that Luke has in his spell board. This means that the Butterfly Monk's life total could range from 1 to 3 over the course of the game, depending on how many of those Summon Butterfly Monk spells Luke has in his spell board. The final card in Luke's deck is Summon Mist Spirit. This allows him to bring 1 Mist Spirit Conjuration into play, but if he's also willing to spend another basic die, he can bring in 1 additional Mist Spirit. These have an attack and life of 1, no recovery, and no special ability. But given how easy it is to pump these out, especially if Luke has a couple copies of that Conjuration spell, with a maximum of 8 units in his battlefield, he can swarm me pretty quick. Now you might notice there's actually 10 copies of this Mist Spirit, but Aradel can only have 8 units out at a time. So why do we need those extra 2 copies? Well, remember, you can deck build. So if that Conjuration spell was given to a different Phoenixborn, they may have more room in their battlefield, where putting out 10 copies of this could be a possibility. So it's really about how you deck build that will allow you to get out more or fewer of these conjurations. Now, some of you might be thinking, after having seen Luke's deck, that I should just save myself the embarrassment and concede the game right now. But listen, you haven't seen my deck yet. This is Oni Viper, and she has 22 life. That's quite a bit more than Luke. So hopefully that will keep me in the game a little bit longer. You will notice, however, that her battlefield is only 3. Remember, Luke's was 8, so at most I can have 3 different units out on the battlefield at a time. I know that doesn't seem good, but stick around. I have some other tricks up my sleeve. My spell board is 4, which is the same as Luke's, and I have a strike ability. This says that after a player has declared attackers, and that could be Luke or me, I can spend 1 basic die and place an exhaustion token on this card, and then I add 2 attack to a target unit for the remainder of this turn. I will also have 5 natural dice. We already saw this effect. It's the same one that Luke had. If I spend a side action and a power die of this type, I can deal 1 damage to a target unit. However, I also have 5 charm magic, which is different than what Luke had. If I use a side action and spend the power side of this die, I then place that die, used to trigger this effect, onto a target unit that I control, which gives it +1 attack and +1 life until the end of the round. At which point, I then move that die to my exhausted pool. So one thing you might already be noticing is that although I can only have 3 units on the battlefield and Luke can have up to 8, I have some ways to boost their attack strength. So that simply means I'm going to have to be precise with my attacks and make really good use of them. Now, as we go into my deck, you'll find my first action spell, which is Call Upon the Realms, and this allows me to change 3 dice in my active pool to the side of my choice. So again, I also have ways to mitigate the luck in my die rolls besides just meditating. But I also have ways to mitigate the luck of the draw. With Open Memories, this action spell allows me to go through my draw deck, find a card I want, put it into my hand, and then shuffle my draw deck afterwards. So if I really need something to help set up my strategy, this will help ensure that that happens. Refresh is an action spell that will allow me to remove all the exhaustion tokens from a target unit. This is nice to have, knowing that in Luke's deck, he has the ability to play an action spell that puts additional exhaustion tokens on a unit. But also, given again the limited number of units I have in my battlefield, This might allow me to block or attack more than once with a unit during a single round. Now here's a monster of a card, Molten Gold. This action spell will require 2 of my most valuable dice, but then I can place 3 wounds on a target unit or Phoenixborn. A lot of the targeted damage effects that we've seen so far have applied directly to units only. This one lets me go right after Luke directly. Transfer is the last action spell I have, and it says that I can move 1 token. Now that could be a wound, exhaustion, or status token from a target player's non-Phoenixborn card onto another non-Phoenixborn card that player controls. This can be used in a number of ways. Getting an exhaustion token off of 1 unit so I can use it again, taking a wound off to help keep it alive longer, or as we'll see later, I have some status token effects on some of my cards, and those can be moved around as well. Golden Veil is a reaction spell. In other words, it can be played even out of turn in reaction to something that's happening. In this case, when an opponent uses a spell, ability, or die power that would target a unit that I control, I can cancel that effect that's trying to resolve. Empower is one of the ready spells that I can put into my spell board, and once it's in play, after a player has declared attackers. Now again, that could be me declaring the attacker or my opponent. I can spend a basic die and put an exhaustion token on this card to give a target unit +1 attack. That will last for the remainder of the turn, and then I can also draw 1 card, and if I do that, I have to discard 1. It also has a focus 1 ability. So that means if I can get 2 empowers into play, I can then also select 1 die in my exhausted pool, roll it, and put it into my active pool. Hypnotize is another ready spell, and this allows me to choose a target unit that I control, and then it will gain the bypass ability for the rest of the turn. Bypass says that this unit cannot be blocked or guarded. So now, given the different ways that I can boost the attack strength of an attacking unit, even though Luke has tons of potential blockers, with Hypnotize, I can bypass them and go right at his Phoenixborn, or a unit that I see as posing too much of a threat. My next ready spell will let me bring out a conjuration. It's called Summon Silver Snake, so no surprise, it lets me summon a Silver Snake to the battlefield. You'll notice down here it has the Spell Guard ability, and that means that spells cannot be used to target or affect this ready spell. It also has 2 focus abilities. If I focus this once, I then place 1 status token on the Silver Snake that I summon, or if it's focused twice, I place an additional status token. Now we'll see why that's important in just a moment. The Silver Snake has an attack of X, a life of 4, and a recovery of 3. That means if Luke doesn't kill it outright, it's going to go back to full health at the end of the round. It also has 2 inexhaustible abilities. The first one is called Consume, and that says that whenever an opponent's unit is destroyed as a result of a spell, attack, counter, ability, or die power that I control. In other words, I have to be the cause of that destruction. I then place 1 status token on this unit. If the destroyed unit was an ally, not a conjuration, then the ally is actually removed from the game. And finally, the X here, which represents the attack value, is equal to the number of status tokens on this unit. So normally the Silver Snake comes into play with 0 attack, unless the Summon Silver Snake ready spell is focused, in which case, you remember, it adds status tokens to the Silver Snake. As well, when this Consume effect is triggered, more status tokens get added. So once again, although I have fewer units on the battlefield, I have the potential to increase the attack strength to a really lethal amount. And that's something Luke, despite his many different units, is going to have to be careful about. Summon Gilder is the final card in my deck. It allows me to summon a Gilder conjuration to my battlefield, and then I may deal 1 damage to a target unit. The Gilder conjuration has an attack of 1, life of 2, and no recovery. It's a unit guard, which means it can step in and block for a unit that's being attacked. And it has Inheritance 1, which is an inexhaustible effect, and this says that when this unit is destroyed, you may place 1 status token on a target unit. So it's another way for me to pump up those Silver Snakes. Well, there you go, the contents of our 2 decks that we'll be using when we start our gameplay, which I hope you'll join us for. If you'd like to know how to play Ashes, we have a full instructional video. I'll put a link to that in the description of this video. And if you have any questions about any of the specific card effects that you saw here, put those in the comments below and I'll answer them as soon as I get a chance. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.